Okay.
Wait 3 minutes.
Get 3 minutes.
We're streaming. Well, yeah, we're streaming.
I'd like to call the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting of July 23rd, 2024 to order. Roll call, we haven't heard from Jason. And Shelley is coming and Anessa is gonna zoom in, right? She's gonna. I'd like to have approval of last minutes on May 28th, 2024.
We approve the minutes as written.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. On the agenda, I know we've got a full agenda. We got a lot of stuff. It'd be nice to recap our meeting with council.
Oh, let's add that to the agenda.
Yeah,
But we do have public comment. There might be someone here
Okay.
that wants to do public comment.
Okay.
So
it's just adding it to the.
would that
We can go-
be unfinished business? Or do
Yeah.
you want that under reports from board members? I think it's a good idea.
Unfinished business,
Okay.
recap of joint meeting.
Great.
Okay, public comment. Is there anyone for public comment?
Anyone out in Zoom want to do a public comment?
Randy, did you have public comment you wanted to share?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I know that Mary had emailed me back, I think it was last week, regarding possibly keeping some of the skate park equipment and moving it to a different location, since the pickleball courts would be going in. I just kind of wanted to see what all would be happening with that and if that's a possibility and if there's anything that we can do to help possibly raise any funds to keep some of the skate park equipment there at Harry Todd Park.
So, we're still assessing the equipment, we're assessing the layout, so we haven't really gotten any further than that, but we were out on site and talked with folks about where that could be, where it wouldn't conflict with what's going on. So we're still doing all of that layout. To move them probably isn't a big enough deal because it wouldn't really cost additional resources, but we'll find that out as we move forward. We've worked with the skate company that makes them, so we're in contact with them. So we're still just in the sort of planning phase of that. So we haven't really gotten any further than what I sent to you last week. So
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I would be really interested. I know that there's a lot of community interest in keeping the skate park there. So I would definitely be interested in helping out. I have a lot of community resources in and out of Lakewood. With the local music scene, local wrestling scene, I could probably throw together a pretty decent benefit to help raise some funds.
great, we'll keep you in the loop.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay. Going to move on to, do you want to do unfinished business, a recap of the joint meeting with council? I think go back, no. It's open. Anyone have any, there was a lot of notes taken, I know that.
I wasn't there.
Okay,
So, tell me, what role do we envision for ourselves with the downtown?
We did talk about the
yeah.
downtown,
Yeah,
part, but it was
high level.
more, a high level that we think that it's a priority today and things. the
I-
council agreed with us pretty much.
Yeah, I think they said that there would, when they're right now assessing the property, whether they can buy the property and all of that. And I do believe they said there'd be a stakeholders group that was put together and the park board's always represented on that. They may send something through the park board to manage before, so they haven't really gotten there yet. They're just still on the, it's a dream. It's a high priority. Council has worked on their goals and, vision update and narrowed them down, and they've kind of all come together saying this is a really high priority. So it's sort of the first time all over council's been focused on one project, and not to have 57 projects, but to have a few projects they can really focus their time and energy, as resources are limited and, you know, staff is limited. So from timing perspective, so. But the council would, we would be involved in some way through facilitation or through having, support on some task force that could include business people and neighbors and economic development and nonprofits, or just whoever be the right people. But the park board, I'm sure, would be involved.
How are we going forward on urban forestry?
We'll talk about that during the summer. We really didn't get into urban forestry, did we?
Yeah.
But I'll bring up an update
They're
too.
doing
that-
the inventory now.
Okay, well, they're doing the inventory, yeah, that's
Right
right.
now, current inventory.
Yeah.
They're, Pierce County's doing a heat inventory too.
Right.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
There was some good discussion about the Lake City property, school property there, and their openness, both the school district and city, to do something there, which is open. But maybe create it into some kind of a park or recreation. There'd probably be a lease for a period of time. School district doesn't want to relinquish that property or sell the property for future needs for schools. But they are open to partner with the city on doing something, which was promising, very promising.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
nice area.
and I think the school district's always been concerned regarding, hello, Miss Vanessa. The school district's always been real concerned regarding liability. That's kind of their excuse as to why they closed the gate. So there could be partnerships in which it would be more open to neighborhood folks. And our council member Pearson, who's our liaison, he's brought it up at the American Lake Improvement Club meetings, and he did bring it up there as well, that he's a real advocate for that because it's this big open space. Different than what we have like American Lake Park. It's not really used for, you know, sports and games and large group activities like that because of the nature of its design. So, and especially with the park being closed next year for a period of time. So I think that's kind of probably something to get clicked into the next CIP, 6-year CIP. Probably not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but for planning for that would be.
So city staff, who meets with the school district on maybe that kind of a discussion, or is it council?
It would be, well, I would get directed by the city manager who takes information from council. So that hasn't happened yet, but we can have conversations with the school board, school district on that. It would probably be a city council, school board conversation. We have, a joint, use agreement. Well, we have a cooperative use agreement for facilities. And then we also have a joint use agreement for the Lake, Louise Elementary School Park, because that was our first city park partnership. There is something in our 6-year CIP about replacing that playground just from a facility, but I think they've already done that. I think they replaced it on their own, which means maybe there's some opportunity for a different kind of partnership. And, you know, I've always thought about, you know, the playground in Tillicum is just dismal. It's like a really bad big toy on some gravel. So maybe finding out what their next steps are. So there's opportunity for that. But we would probably have some kind of a, again, stakeholders group. When we did the cooperative use agreement, we had city staff and school district staff and school board working together on that. So that would probably be the next step, but we haven't gotten specific direction to do that yet.
I know the Lake City Church often will rent that, will take that.
That property
Mhm.
for activities?
Mhm.
Oh,
I'm putting on a back to school fiesta in August there. We had to go to that church, we had a 100-year party there, and we get permission, we go through the liability. So
do they rent to actually charge you or just give
yeah,
you?
not much.
Not much, yeah. Because we used to work with them, I know Nikki has for like overflow parking for at Tillicum, they like for $10 just to get all the stuff together, so. Okay, well, that's interesting that they're able to do that, so.
Yeah.
Any other comments from
We talked about the H barn.
Mhm.
A couple of our city council members emphasized, want to make sure we lean on that as public gathering space, which is really what we've intended all along. Not just for parties and weddings and what have you, and groups and organizations, but an actual gathering place for anything you can imagine.
Good town hall.
You know, who knows, everything from yoga to
Our older
Like
adults
the-
don't have a senior center, the
Yeah.
youth council, one of the things we talked about is our youth council. They really want a place to gather and have a voice, but they want to play. You know, they're still young people, and so it's just a perfect spot for that kind of use, right? So,
Well, it should be a great, multi-use building, so keep everybody in line that direction.
Kate, anything that you saw? Or Shelley?
Not anything extra special, except that we talked about senior citizens and getting them to farmers markets, and we talked about a little bit about farmers markets, especially if we have something at the old bagel, the QFC, getting people to that spot because transportation is not the best in Lakewood.
That's true.
So it's just the feasibility of moving people around and figuring out.
Parking's a problem there too.
Well, the plan hasn't been developed yet, but it's the motorway. And there is parking, but if you have vendors set up in the parking area,
Right.
then depends on how much area in the old QFC that we do actually get. Since I guess it's still.
right
under-
now, right now they're looking at the bagel shop. It's about 1.5 acres or something. It's not large, but they're not necessarily talking about the QFC.
Right,
No, I have
right.
seen the QFC property had a big sign that got put up that said it's for sale. So I don't know if they're taking some progressive things, but yeah. We get an awful lot of older adults at our farmers market. I know Nikki, you see a lot of those things too, but, and it's when we do our festivals and things, there's not that much space on Motor Ave to, once
Yeah.
you start putting in a few food trucks and vendors, it's surprising how little space there is compared to how many people used to pack here at the city hall, but
There is that parking on that other side though, where the old Thriftway used to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, and that we've utilized that and Little Church on the Prairie too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Any further comments on the joint meeting? Okay, let's move on then to new business. So street end priority matrix pilot project recommendations.
So I'll start off. Most of you, I think, have met Stacy before. She's been here for several meetings and done some great presentations. And I'm not sure you've had a chance to meet David De La Cruz, who is a new Parks Planner, Capital Projects Manager person with us as well. And so we all work together on this project, and Stacy's going to take the lead in providing a presentation that was mailed out to you that talks a little bit about where we were and where we're at and where we might go. So do you want me to do a little bit of history, or are you going to cover that with 2002 with council? I'll just start. So, we've worked on street ends, those of us that have been around, we've worked on street ends multiple times. And in 2022, we did an update to the report. And it was really taking the previous information and updating it, and Park Board looked at it, recommended it to council. There was a matrix in there, and then council reviewed. We had a lot of good feedback, and then talked about picking a pilot project for 25-26 budget, which we're working on right now. So this is the time to take a look at the information that we gathered in 2022, an updated matrix based on some different pieces of information, and coming up with a recommendation for council, which by this end of this meeting, if you're ready, that would be great. If not, council will be talking about this end of September, so there's still a little time to play if we wanted to. And that's the point of doing this, is getting that recommendation to do a pilot project, a sample project for a street end enhancement that we can then do in 25 and 26 to show how it can work. Because we haven't done that yet, so.
So we're targeting one, is that the,
Well, the board, yeah, so I mean, that's what council asked for, was a prioritization to pick a pilot project. They said a pilot project. Yeah, this board can give whatever recommendation it wants, right? So if you found that there might be more than one, but there's only, so much resources in the bank, so. But it would be to, that their direction was to give it, to recommend a pilot project. And then, so we'll go through our project, and then we can talk about some of the feedback that we got today, earlier today, so.
So I'm gonna summarize too, since there's so much information and it was quite some time ago, it was early 2023 that we reviewed this 2022 updated street end report, so it's hopefully a little bit fresher in your minds for when we get down into the actual criteria for each site. So to recap, what is a street end? A street end is a street terminating at a lake. It is public right of way. Sometimes it's a parcel on some of these sites, and it is a public access easement to the water. So as Mary just discussed, she spoke about the 2022 update, but the original plan and analysis occurred in 2009. And there were 2 additional sites at that time. So a total of 14 original sites that on 4 lakes within the community. So the updated study focused on 12 total sites on 4 lakes. And we hired some consultants to support this endeavor. We did some field assessments at the sites. There was no surveys. It was all, the plans were based on GIS data. And then there was some schematic designs developed and a cost estimate to accompany each of those schematic designs in the original report, which Park Board reviewed and recommended back in, I think it was February of 2023. So here is a summary. I don't know if I can, I'm gonna do this, Nikki, to move that little, so people can, how to move that? No, this is.
Oh,
Apologies, because that kind of blocks some of the screen here. If we could drag it just into the very, very corner. You grab the top of
wrong
it,
person.
right there.
Oh, look at
Yeah, you
me,
did it.
left-handed.
Okay. So the sites start on Lake Silicon. Number 1's kind of on the top, on the east shore, and it goes counterclockwise around each lake. Westlake Avenue, Mount Tacoma Drive, Beach Lane, Lake Avenue, and 100th Street and Holly Hedge Lane are all on Lake Silicon. There's quite a few sites. Starting at site number 8. So site number 7 is skipped. We just kept the same numeric format as the original study, which I apologize if that's confusing, but just to go back, and if someone wanted to, review that original data, that's what we did. So,
Well, and Edgewater was, even though it's not technically a street end, even though part of it is a street end, we did include that in the original study because it was there on the lake and nothing had been done. And so, because we were in the middle at that time of doing, all this Edgewater stuff, we didn't have.
we
it be a part
omitted
of this.
Edgewater from, it's also a park versus a street end, so the scope is a little bit different at that particular site. So Lake City Boulevard and Wadsworth Street are the 2 sites on American Lake, one on the North Shore, one on the South Shore. There's Lake Louise has 2 sites also, 104th and Holden Street, and Gravelly Lake has 2 sites, Hilltop and Linwood Lane. So some of the program goals for the development of the sites was to improve water access, improve livability for the community, and expand the diversity of recreation for the community. Encourage environmental stewardship. And for the scope, since many of these sites are narrow or they're steep, or maybe there's existing trees that we want to preserve, we have the goal of one of the sites at each of the lakes should provide ADA access so that there was an equitable experience for each of the lakes. To improve views to the lake shore, many of these sites, almost all of these sites, have really dense existing underbrush and vegetation. Have positive impacts to the neighbors or minimize the impacts to the neighbors in the neighborhood. Improve walkability. SEPTED safety is just through natural site surveillance, provide a safe kind of open view sheds in and around the site, so there's positive use.
Will you tell them what subted means?
Crime prevention through environmental design. Wayfinding and signage, so each of the sites, you'll see this reoccurring kind of blue dot graphic that is with some additional signage, so it's really to that it's clear that it's a public access site to the community and to improve equity for our community, since not everyone can live on a lake or has access to those lakes. That's really a big priority in a lot of our comprehensive documents, as well as you all are aware. So the design approach was really conservative development. We really just, most of the sites have very passive use, accessible trails, but really kind of minimal landscape design and conservative development. Where feasible, based on the width of the site and the neighborhood and street, we've provided a parking strategy. So some of the sites have parking proposed, others do not. Minimizing impacts to both the environment and the community, as I previously touched on, and the one accessible site per lake. Providing bicycle parking, site signage, and a site marker. Site furnishings, so there's some minimal site furnishings with benches and picnic tables. Low maintenance native landscaping, preserving the existing tree canopy, providing a fencing where there isn't one to delineate the use of the site in the context of the surrounding neighbors. Again, the SEPTA design principles for site safety and positive use. Low impact to the shoreline, so much of the development of the shoreline is with natural materials, rocks and logs, and natural versus a more intensive development. Some of the sites, or most of the sites, even though there's not a survey, through aerial imagery, we were able to determine that there is apparent encroachment on some of the sites with the neighbor, and you'll see that on each of the plans, those areas are hatched. We've assumed that there's a resolution to support the schematic design development of the sites. Sometimes, full development of those encroachment areas, other times partial development, depending on what the type of encroachment was. And again, there was no surveys. This is all based on GIS.
Question, 1 AD site per lake. What would that entail?
We would like to provide an accessible parking stall. All of the sites sought to provide accessible paved trails. And the goal was to reach the lake, the water's edge, from the street end to the water's edge. So
Every site has to have ADA?
no, one site per lake.
No, so if there were
One per
6
lake.
sites, say on Lake Stilicum, we would make sure one of them was ADA accessible. So you could provide that ADA accessible access to an individual versus not all of them can be made ADA.
To get to the water.
But yeah,
Correct, to get to the water. So we're gonna go through lake by lake, and we'll just briefly review the schematic design that was proposed for each of the sites. So we'll start with Lake Stilicum, with Westlake Avenue. We'll just go in order around the lake. We're starting on the eastern shore, and we're gonna go counterclockwise around the lake. So site number 1, Westlake Avenue, was the site we proposed for accessible parking. And there was a current kind of a natural trail through the underbrush with a little lawn chair at the lake. So there's some apparent community use at the site when we visited. It's a fairly wide site, 62 feet of shoreline, and there wasn't that many existing significant trees on site. So the view would be fairly open from the end of the street. And the slope was minimal from the paved street end to the lake shore. And there was also no apparent encroachment. So here's a view of that plan. And here's that blue graphic is really just kind of almost like a public art. It would be painted on the roadway. So it was apparent that that's the access point, and that's a consistent design throughout the site. There's that ADA parking on the north side of the parking area at the end of the paved street, which has a switchback trail system down to the lake shore with a pretty minimal beach, but beach improvements nonetheless. So this site doesn't show up, but the next site will show an example of encroachment. Mount Tacoma Drive, there is moderate apparent encroachment and again, minimal slope. There was just on-street parking throughout the neighborhood. The site was a little narrower at only 28 feet wide. Here is a view of that plan. So there's no parking. It's just really an access point with a paved trail to a beach. And that hatch shaded area in the bottom on all the plans kind of delineates, as well as that upper kind of building area.
Here and then right there.
Mhm.
See how that's got a little hatch?
Right.
That's the area that we assume is somebody's encroached on the site.
Site number 3, Beach Lane, again, just on-street parking in the neighborhood and the right of way. The moderate encroachment was that the site was landscaped by the adjacent residents. There's fairly open views from the street, and as you can see, because we're standing at the street on the picture on the right, minimal slope, and it's about 30 feet of width for the total site. So here's the proposed design, very similar to the previous design. We have where feasible with the trees planted along the residence to try to provide a little bit of a vegetated buffer between the users and those that house to the south. This one includes a small paved picnic area above a beach. This has some stone steps. So again, not the stone steps bring you down to the beach grade. Not every site had water access just based on the slopes of the site. But then again, an improved beach at the lakeshore. Site number 4, Lake Avenue, again, no minimal parking, so it would be on-street parking in the neighborhood. It was raining when we went out to the site, and as you can see in the picture, there was some street runoff down into the site all the way to the lake. There was some significant apparent encroachment on the site, but there is some open view sheds, a moderate slope. And this one, we measured the actual lineal feet of the actual shoreline. This one has kind of a cup-shaped shoreline slanting through the site. So it does, the site's not wider, but it does have more width of the actual shoreline itself. So we've proposed a natural swale to divert some of that runoff from the street away from the pedestrian path access to a bench terminating at a small improved beach area. You can see the hatched area at the top of the plan is the apparent encroachment with the neighboring residents. Those trees, though, are all existing along and retained along the opposite side of the site. Site number 5, 100th Street. Again, significant apparent encroachment. This site width is rather wide at 84 feet, so it did support some minimal parking. There's moderate slope to the site, and there were several really significant existing trees on the site. You can kind of see from the picture behind that white pickup truck some of the larger trees on the site and on the site plan here. So well, there's not. Or no, there's on-street parking. There's no parking proposed at this site. So this southern residence has attached, it's a carport area that appears to be in the right-of-way adjacent to the site. And this site design didn't have, considering that's their primary residence, there wasn't kind of a design of that area, but the design has just a switchback area with again a small picnic area. This has a larger kind of open landscaped area than some of the sites and a small improved beach.
I was just gonna say right now, this property owner has put in an application to vacate the street. And so council will be considering that in several weeks. And but I think they recognized as we were wandering the streets and doing that that's problematic because they obviously don't have documentation to show that that is not in the right of way that they have people use. So but that public hearing will be in a couple of weeks. So
First part of August or something. Yeah.
I think the 6th, yeah.
Holly Hedge Lane is the last site, I believe, on Lake Steilacoom. It was the most narrow site. There was actually no physical access to the lake. This like 4 or 5 foot retaining wall and heavy dense vegetation prevented access. It's also only 10 feet wide. So there was no development proposed given the grading and the the width of this site. Here is just an aerial view though of the right of way. Moving over to American Lake, to Lake City Boulevard and Wadsworth. Lake City Boulevard is fairly adjacent to American Lake Park, and there is quite a decent, there's currently parking that supports this site, which makes access just more easily accessed by the community to fisher people. So since there's not a public fishing site on the North Shore at American Lake Park, we do actually refer folks that are looking for public fishing on American Lake to this site. There is significant encroachment as well at the site, and there's a public fishing pier proposed to support this existing use. The shoreline lineal feet is 84 feet. So this picture is kind of looking down. There's kind of a concrete area that's paved. You do have to kind of traverse between the lake shore and the lake water to get over there, but folks obviously navigate that. And that is actually a public utility vault supporting power. So here's some additional pictures of the site. There's a moderate slope to the site, but there is a current picnic table. And then the top right photo shows, it's hard to tell, there's not a car parked there, but there's I think 3 existing stalls, angled stalls to the left of that picture that are supporting parking.
I think there's also an old boat launch in the water there.
We heard that, after or during the design development on this dashed area where it says removable concrete boat ramp, there was some concrete supporting, I guess, historic use of a boat launch in that area. So as you can see, that hatched area is actually the primary driveway access to that southern residence, as well as some of the lakeshore. So given that this site has the public fishing pier, we wanted to provide an accessible route to that public fishing pier. There are steps on the north part of the site that also go down to an improved beach area. And it's assumed that the fishing pier would be built atop that vault, the power vault, but that's also obviously some additional conversation would need to happen around the feasibility of that. The other American Lake site, Wadsworth Street, there's an existing boat launch for the community, which is supports also Silcox Island access. There wasn't any apparent encroachment. There was also no parking to support that boat launch use. Bill's Boathouse is immediately adjacent. You can see on the bottom right picture the parking area to support Bill's Boathouse.
Actually, no, this is a private parking lot for Silcox Island.
Mm.
They were just using that because Bill's Boathouse had burned down.
Mm.
So they were kind of coming and going with construction. This is actually a construction barge. They were moving stuff around. But this actually is a private gated parking lot for Silcox Island folks. They also have parking and some storage facilities up the hill. Again, private for Silcox Island.
There isn't, I go there to measure the lake and there's no public parking anywhere. It's very
Yeah, it's a really narrow
even
street.
on the streets, you can't.
Close by, yeah.
This was the only site with an apparent designated parcel. I mean, that would need to be verified with some survey, but with a formal survey. And it's a fairly narrow site, as you can see, 26 feet wide. So not a huge change in the design of this, but some improvements to the existing launch. And again, with the graphic to support that this is a public access site. There is an existing group of utility poles, so there's a small landscape buffer to protect those poles from folks launching using the launch.
And there's no dock, there's no public dock there.
No.
You're not really sure.
Yeah, and there's not one
The
proposed.
boat launch, you go down and there's.
Yeah, it's like, because of the power loading.
Yeah.
Yeah, dip there.
Lake Louise, there are 2 sites, 104th Street and Holden Street. So 104th is also the only public boat launch. It's a gravel launch around, again, a utility vault that's kind of jutting into the site, which makes launching rather difficult. It's also kind of located on a sharp curve on the corner. So I imagine, turning your boat around, or if there's no parking to support the site, is a significant hurdle to the launch use. But there was some apparent community use. There's a small picnic table. It's not shown and a trash can from folks utilizing this site. There was some significant encroachment to the north, which is shown in the hatched area. So there was kind of a separation of pedestrian path to the north around the vault to a small beach area, which is a significant safety improvement to separate the boat users from the pedestrian use and access to the lake shore, and then some improvements to the launch. Holden Street is the other Lake Louise site, which was quite heavily vegetated. There was a lot of a lot of trees and vegetation on the site. It's about 42 feet wide, and there was also an existing utility vault on this plan. So this site had proposed accessible parking just near that vault with a pathway. There was also a stormwater which was channelized into the lake to separate from the pedestrian pathway to a small picnic area overlooking an improved beach. Gravelly Lake has two sites, Hilltop Lane and Linwood Lane. They're both very similar in width and topography, and they both have a significant existing tree canopy on site. We couldn't, unfortunately, due to the blackberry vegetation, do a site visit to the lakeshore on Hilltop Lane, but we've been assumed in our matrix summary, due to the width of the site and the similarities between the two sites, that they would have similar development potential. So we've given them the same score in that regard and
The first time
assumed.
we looked at this, I actually walked down that because blackberries weren't this bad.
Oh.
So
How did it go?
it's an access to the lake.
Yeah.
You know, it really is, but
Where is no, is there something about parking there?
Oh, we didn't assume parking on this particular site, but we did assume a parking spot on the other site that we developed. So here's just a view of extremely steep topography with heavy tree development down to the lake shore. It's 24 feet wide, so it's also really narrow. Linwood Lane was the site that we did propose development on Gravelly Lake, and there was some moderate encroachment through, it's just been landscaped by an adjacent neighbor, and as you can see on the picture on the lower right, it's actually been fenced, so it doesn't appear to be public property. But there are some significant tree canopy, and it's also 24 feet wide. So looking at the plan, there's also some stormwater vaults on the site. We're able to provide one parking access point, which terminates at a viewpoint to the lake. Given the steep slope, we were not able to propose an ADA access route all the way to the lake shore, but there is a series of steps and switchbacks that navigate the steepest part of the slope down to a small improved beach.
You just clarify it. It almost sounded like you said you were providing an ADA parking spot platform, but the ADA parking's at the street level, correct?
Right.
So what you just said, and you could pedestrian get to a platform for a view, but not all the way down.
Yes, not all the way down. So here is a breakdown of all of the cost estimates that accompany each of those schematic site plans. At this time in 2022, we had just projected the cost into 2024. So we'll need to assume some additional escalation to whatever the proposed new construction schedule would be. This was the previous matrix that was provided in that street report, and the top three scoring sites were Westlake Avenue on Lake Steilacoom, Wadsworth Street on American Lake, and Linwood on Gravelly Lake, with Wadsworth being the top scoring site. The other two sites tied for second place. So there's 7 or 6 total at this time criteria that we assessed. And we've since expanded those criteria. So here's where those original 3 sites were. There's one on each lake. So looking into this revised summary, we looked at what were some of the project goals and the considerations of a pilot project. And some of these goals are included in the matrix and some are not, and we'll go through that. So feasible site development and timeline, given kind of encroachment resolution, that was a consideration given the the legal resolution of, depending on the type of encroachment or the scale of the encroachment that we witnessed at each site. We would like to set an example of success for the development of the remaining sites with a successful development of the first initial site. We wanted to support equitable access and use and have the biggest bang for our buck. So dollar for dollar, given the site constraints of the steepness or the width of the site, some of the sites were more expensive to develop based on the constraints. And we also wanted to, in the future, have a successful development project that would engage the community and the neighbors and have some future stewards that were excited about this improved site and we're looking forward to using and supporting positive use of these areas. So if everybody, it would be helpful, we have a larger plan if you want to reference this as I talk through. I'm going to talk through kind of the breakdown of the criteria by category, and you can reference kind of the scores, and we'll get through this, and then there'll be a point at the end that you can ask questions or address anything that we miss. But starting, so at the top, the very first kind of row across the top is the category, and we've got need, equity, feasibility, use, cost, and safety and security were all the criteria metrics that we tried to address. So need, there are 4 separate categories that we looked at. Were there proposed boat launch improvements? Given that that's really a community need, we've decided to assess those improvements would be significant to the community. Is there a fishing pier proposed? We do get quite a lot of phone calls and public requests for fishing access to all of the lakes in our community. Is there existing lake public access? So this is relating to the fact that Gravelly Lake does not have public access currently. And so tried to address that. And the last one is current community use. So based on our assessment of an understanding of, is the site already being used? We wanted to support that use and further develop support of those sites that currently had folks accessing the water through those sites. So the next metric is equity.
So when you talk, just a second,
Go ahead.
the needed, the proposed boat launch, you're talking non-motorized boats.
We're talking
mean,
the Melody Lane, which had
yeah,
the gravel,
which
and
would be,
Wadsworth,
yeah.
which is paving improvements,
Okay.
resurfacing improvements to the
Like
existing
Louise.
gravel conditions. There were no new boat launches, hand carry or otherwise, proposed, although if folks wanted to park in the community and navigate the public access point with a canoe or a kayak or a paddleboard, we didn't really define the use per se versus it would certainly be support that use.
And we just know from use permitting and especially with shoreline management and the new laws coming out, to create a new boat launch would be really a challenge, whereas improving something that's already there would provide just safer, better use for people that are already using some.
No, you're good. Okay, let's see. Equity is the next metric that we looked at, and there are three columns that support equity. We looked at median income by census tract, and we'll get a little further into the kind of the details of this with a map. The health and social need rankings by census tract, and ADA access and parking. So here is a map that shows the census tracts in our community. We did consider that folks from up to a half a mile away could be walking and accessing these sites. So outside of the immediate adjacent census tract can certainly use the site, but because of the layout of the census tracts, and that's really the data that we were able to pull based on the site and have accurate data, it became too difficult to form like a half-mile buffer, and sometimes that fell within the census tract that had waterfront properties. Sometimes it fell outside of the tract, like for instance on the east shore of Lake Stilichum. When you go a half mile, you jump outside of those waterfront properties into a much lower median income. So we do recognize that really these sites are supporting access from all throughout the community, and we do want to acknowledge that that does exist, but we wanted to have kind of an apples to apples data that we're grabbing for each of these sites based on the census tract. So on the east and south part of our community, we do have a greater need with a less than $60,000 median income, which is shown in the turquoise. And we do acknowledge that that goal of a half-mile walk for each residence is a need. So we're providing this map as a visual to support that we've thought of that. So feasibility is the next metric summary. And this is really relating to apparent encroachment. So again, there were no site surveys. There's really an unknown resolution as to the, location or development of that space. And then there's also an unknown cost and a timeline associated with that legal resolution.
So it's all mostly unknown.
It's fairly unknown, that's correct, but
we know it's not gonna be easy or cheap, because, there's so much that goes into a survey. Appraisals, assessment, conflict. It can take quite some time and a lot of money before you even get to a resolution. So part of feasibility is that if there's no encroachment, it's going to be a lot easier to do a pilot project than to pick one that has a lot of complicated factors.
yeah, that's not to say we're not, abandoning the development of sites that have encroachment, but really considering that setting up the program of full development for everything with a successful initial project. Use is the next summary, and there were two categories that we assessed use. One is the development of the site bringing significant new value to the community? So Wadsworth, for instance, there wasn't a lot of proposed development that's going to change the current use. It will improve it a little bit, but it's not going to change the use entirely because there wasn't enough space to know any new use of the site. And then additionally, the lineal feet of shoreline, given that water access is a primary goal of development of these sites, there's greater development potential on sites with more lineal feet of shoreline. There's also higher capacity use, greater potential for habitat restoration, less impact to the neighbors due to the inclusion of some landscape buffers or just more buffer between the use of that site and the public. Cost was the next metric summary that we looked at, and some considerations based on those schematic costs. Some additional considerations should be that schematic costs, I've never done a project that costs were reduced. Unfortunately. So for the most part, schematic costs always increase. Steep slopes and narrow sites have limited construction access, which is just really a huge unknown. So it's hard to anticipate some of these. So Gravelly Lake, for instance, which is shown on the bottom, we've assessed the site just based on typical costs, for the development of a pavement pathway, but the logistics of getting construction equipment down a steep slope with trees is another story. So that can also increase the costs. And then more cost doesn't always mean more benefits. So given the constraints of some of these sites and the access, there may or may not be, the same potential with the same dollar for dollar development cost. And the last metric summary is safety and security. So looking at, we want folks to have a positive experience. We want to have as least impact on the neighborhood as possible, with open sight lines down to the water in and around the site, so that there is positive use. Clear visibility typically means there's hopefully positive use of the space. So some of the sites have more dense tree canopy, or they're steeper, and there's just less natural sight lines throughout the site. Some additional, so 3 of the metrics that were really not included in this summary to consider with the just the overall scoring and all of the sites development are that we want to engage the community and future stewards in these types of public access development sites. We want to set an example of success, and we want to have the biggest bang for our buck. So all of that's a lot of information, a lot of sites to really go quickly through. We want to consider, is there anything that came up to your mind as we're going through some of these metrics, or as you've looked at some of these metrics? Is there something that we didn't consider? And then we also want to bring to your attention that this wasn't just a 1, 2, 3, 4 scoring criteria. Some of these metrics were weighted, given that we felt like it was a critical assessment, or it's really so apparent encroachment, for instance, was weighted by 2 points because the significance of resolving that is quite difficult.
I think that was a great job you did there.
Yeah.
Because it really recognizes that you can move brush in a fence line, but a
Yeah.
building is
Yeah.
going to be a nightmare to deal with when you finally get to that street end.
And when you say weighted, it's actually a -2 points
Yeah.
because you're not
Yeah.
getting value.
For that
It's a
high
particular,
score
yeah,
win, so.
so the highest score, given the the lower the score, the less you're gonna, the lower on the overall scoring you're gonna be, that did get a negative points. The other 4 categories that were weighted were existing lake access, and that was supporting the development of the 2 Gravelly Lake sites. The shoreline lineal feet was weighted by 1 point, just given the potential for increased use and capacity. The current use was weighted by 2 points because it's supporting current community use as far as we could observe. And then the fishing pier was also weighted by 1 point, given the constant demand that we have in the summer from the community for that.
So I just had one point.
Fishing pier, it's 2 points.
So not all of the lake
Is
shores
it too?
are of equal quality. So for example, Westlake is pretty shallow there, I believe, the way it looked. And Silicon Lake has frequent toxic algae blooms, for example. So the quality of the lake access could be impacted by the existing shore structure, as well as the existing, invasive plant species. And it could be like, oh, we could go there, but we can't.
So how might that be recognized on the matrix then, when you say, we understand that they're different from a quality perspective,
Right.
so how might that be like incorporated in this based on what you said?
Immediate shoreline. So when you have a steeper lake, or for example, Gravelly Lake is quite pristine. It has hardly any invasive species in it. It would be a better quality experience.
Quality of the water or the shoreline?
What's the quality of shoreline habitat probably,
Or water entrance even.
yeah.
I don't know if,
Realistic, these are gonna be people with, blow up rubber rafts and.
Right, like you are now, like we see now down there.
That's what it's gonna be used for.
Yeah.
That's what it should be used for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you're going to Westlake
If
and
it's
there's
6 inches deep
it's 6 inches
and out
deep and
200
it's full of
yards.
toxic
Yeah.
green algae that morning, then that was a waste of money because you can't go in there or take your dog there.
I don't know if there would be some database with the state for, maybe like with water algae treatments, if
think
there's
you
a
could go-
database you could look on like a 5-year period or
Yeah,
something.
You can
to-
go to, so the county's been keeping record, all 3 of those lakes being measured monthly on one of the lake monitors. So you can go back and look at our water quality. Silicon Lake has a lot of blooms. We can get data from the lake management districts as well. They should have, how often are you treating? What are you treating for? Where are you treating?
So
Gravelly Lake-
just for full disclosure too, I tried to reach out multiple times to the Lake Silicon Management
Mhm.
organization and had difficulty getting in touch with them. So if we had a secondary point of contact that we could just access.
Yeah, just keep trying because, you're the lake management for our lake. But not everybody is involved with the city. So that's why you don't have lake management districts being fully.
Well, like the Lake Management District for American Lake is milfoil. And
Right.
then and the Improvement Club is about buoys, they're not
Yeah.
other. So I just want to clarify. You're talking about shoreline habitat or water quality or both? And are you talking about current or what it might happen if you add access. So we're just trying to have it be
Yeah,
consistent
yeah, so
across. So what do
I
you?
don't think it's adding access. We want to say each lake has its own ecological, the water itself, the water.
Water.
You're talking about the user's experience of the in the
Yes,
water
yes.
itself
Whether
based
there's-
on.
Whether there's large growth of milfoil or other aquatic
Okay,
vegetation that will trip you up and drown you. You know, there's an experience that that could be had at each. And so Stilicum Lake should have, they've been treated for years. Their lake manager just recently passed away. They should have somebody that they're gonna hire again, but there should be records of what's being treated and how long it's been treated and when.
Is it driven by heat domes that we're having now too?
Silicon Lake
Okay.
is driven by the shallowness of it. and
Okay.
The amount of nutrients that are in it.
Okay.
American Lake was just our milk well.
Yeah.
You know, our lake is really super clear. So.
yeah,
like,
because
Bradley Lake
because
is
it's so
very
deep.
clear.
It's so deep,
It's so
yeah.
deep, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a lot of water.
Silicon Lake has an average depth of 14 feet,
Yeah.
and there are some nutrient loads from, I think, Ground Springs and like
Yeah.
Ponce de Leon has
It
some,
was a swamp before,
yeah, so,
dammed up meadow is what it was.
Yeah.
Got all that rotted stuff on the bottom. And then Bradley Lake is quite pristine.
Mhm.
You can see quite far down and, the Pierce County Conservation District had a water quality monitoring for up to 10 years that Lake American, the city also had those records, but I'm continuing to monitor it. And so we measure that every month from April to October, all the oxygen, all the everything. So Bradley Lake is also being monitored by private individuals, so we can get that data. And you can use that to say these lakes are more clear. So plus the shallow beach on West Lake would be less quality experience than the steeper street ends, because the water is going to be a little deeper.
well, if I had a small child though, I mean, maybe
Mhm.
for safety,
Yeah.
might want a shallower
I don't know if they're
experience,
how
but-
deep it is, but then Bradley Lake is quite steep,
Mhm.
But because it has had very little outside boating, we have very little. I didn't find any invasive species except for our favorite
Yellow.
iris.
Yellow flag.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we went around and peered deeply, and there's nothing there. There's native stuff, but there's no milfoil. There's no invasive stuff. So it's been protected.
So if you were to pick a score of some sort, what kind of scoring would you think would be appropriate as we look at any kind of changes to the matrix? Like if you gave a high to low, do you give it based on the lake or based on the quality? Is it like you get 2 points, 1.0? Because there's really four lakes.
Yeah, I
we're
think
talking about.
probably the greatest thing would be frequency of toxic algae. That's something that all our lakes have. We're gonna find them more frequent on Silicon, Lake Louise, and less frequent on Bradley.
Sometimes we look at the data and then there'll be like a even spread. So let's say it's like 1 treatment a year or 5 treatments a year. Then you
Mhm.
could say,
Yeah.
0 to 1 is 1 scoring, or more than 1 is 1 scoring, or none is 1
Because
scoring.
Lake Louise is clear and they do once a year, right? So,
Yeah, so maybe, because toxic algae is the most dangerous thing for the public to come upon. How many you go to the health department?
Yeah, that's a part.
And,
yeah, okay,
they weren't always reported because they come and go very quickly,
right.
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
still. They might
So-
have
Posting might be essential
yeah,
when there is an issue.
Yeah.
And I
they
know that
kinda-
takes
well, they-
somebody to do that, but still,
But they've now gone to where they have an information sign, and we used to post all the time. They make us switch our signs around all the time, but now they do a sign that has like a picture of toxic algae and says like, if you see this,
Mhm.
don't go in the water. So they're not having it
Okay.
be low, medium, high, green, yellow, red. Now it's just an informational sign. So I'm not sure they're just from a, like, as they could find
Yeah.
people to post them. So
Yeah,
we have sort of
probably
a year round. So,
frequency of treatment. you know,
Frequency of
frequency of treatment,
Mhm.
and probably the amount, the acreage treated. When you're treating. You know, we don't. I think.
So Janet, would you be able to provide feedback? I mean, if we did it right this second, could you go through and say Stillicum, American Lake, Louise, and Gravel Lake? Could we give it a score and just add that so we could take a look at it? From a.
Just from my experience,
Mhm.
I would weight it, would say Gravely is the clearest. This would be probably American.
We would say
Like,
you'd
would you do
get
like a
like
4 or
3 points
3,
if
2?
it's clear water.
One.
Yeah, Clearwater would be.
You
Are
get
we
like,
waiting for higher or lower? So the lower the score is.
the
that
higher is
Lake?
better.
The
So
higher the score
clear
is,
would
the
be-
more
yeah.
pristine, because you're trying to get a
Okay, so
quality.
Bradley would be a 3, American. And I would say Stillicum like a 1,
Silicon's
Yeah.
one.
yeah, and American Lake probably a 2, so.
How about a Lake Louise? Would that be about a 2 as well, or?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sorry, guys, I'm typing. So we said 3 for clear gravelly, and then we said Lake Silicon and Lake Louise are both 2.
No.
American.
Stillicum's a 1.
2 is American.
Yeah, and then American and Lake Louise are both a 2.
Silicon.
What we did was, Stacy provided a matrix, but we could adjust it if there's
Well, I could
feedback, and we
go-
could just to see.
I
just to
could go
see, does
plug
it-
that in right now. I'm gonna do it. Just give me a second. So 3, 3, 1, 2. I should have done it right by my lake so I can see what I'm doing. And then,
Does the lake,
two.
height change in these different lakes?
Mhm.
The water levels, yeah.
Water levels, so the
But does
ordinary,
it change consistently because
Yeah.
the
well, they,
rainfall in the water?
yeah, evaporate. I know Louise has gone down,
So's American gone down
American,
greatly. It's on its retreat.
And then this is
Mhm.
gonna be.
And I don't know about gravel.
It varies, we've got a graph, it's not as low as it's ever been. It could get
But
low.
different areas are,
Louise is a 2 too.
I got,
and there are a number
Lake
of
Louise,
people
those are
that
both 2.
have water rights.
Yeah,
Mm.
because it's
Yeah,
really pretty
city.
clear. They do. They
Okay.
treat it.
And I don't think you
So-
can renege on that because that was a state thing.
Right, and the city is
Does that change?
pumping.
so Westlake
water,
and
but they're not
Lake
sure,
City
right?
are now
No,
tied for
Westlake,
number 1.
they're
It
not sure
changes a little at
exactly
1
how
point
this
between
stuff
these
actually
2.
affects the lake.
But
So
it's still higher than
the-
gravity.
The way the
That's-
water travels under the ground.
Aquifers,
yeah.
So you're making a new column, is what you're doing?
Yeah, I just put a new
Yeah.
column, so I plug that information in and, just with the 1, 2, 3 scoring, it's so now instead of Westlake being 1 point in the lead, the top 2 are Westlake and Lake City Boulevard, both at 16 points. Then the second scoring point would be Wadsworth. So whereas now,
They
shoot, I
basically
just
didn't change
updated
the
the
ranking
wrong one.
much,
No.
except for Briggs Gravelly lay up.
Brings Gravelly
relative
Lake
to
up a
the
little bit,
others.
yeah, to 13, which is still, would be 4th.
So it's Westlake,
Westlake
Lake
and
City are
Lake
ones.
City are
Top.
top score, 16
Mhm.
points.
Wadsworth.
Wadsworth is number 3 at 15 points. And then if you wanted to pick
And
another one.
Lake
since those
City
are tied,
has, so
Linwood
if you're
would
gonna,
have
yeah,
13 points.
Linwood has 13, so it's number 4. So if you were to pick between the 216, Westlake Avenue does not have encroachment and Lake City Boulevard does.
Yeah, so that's the
But do we
difference.
have to have a question about that? Do we have to? Improvements there, but could we landscape around it and? just
You,
as part of
once
it?
the city knows, you can't like pretend it's not there.
Yeah.
So it's an illegal use of public funds. I mean,
Yeah.
what it means is that the city could work with the property owner and provide an easement. It could,
Hmm.
it could sell a portion of it. It could vacate a portion of it.
In
There's
the
all that
in the
negotiation that can
meantime,
happen.
Could there be a development there? Do we have to wait
No.
5 years?
Well, it would be up to council to decide that, but you wouldn't typically spend a bunch of money developing around something and then, I mean, you would design for the whole thing
Right.
and then you would come back. So, I mean, it's just
You wanna-
typically you wouldn't. You would
logistically.
have a clear property once you know that there's a problem there.
Cause it just seems like, with that Lake City, the way it's being used and the demographic of the people that use it. It's just such a great place for them to cool off and to use the fishing and.
Agreed.
So the current community use was assessed in that particular circumstance. The median income, because that's an equity, and then the perspective, and then the fishing pier. So that, all those
Right.
considerations were given extra points on that particular.
No, I agree. I think it was very-
So we'll get through too, because I know Wadsworth is coming up in the scoring, and there's some additional considerations with that particular site as well coming up. Because we can't it's difficult to capture everything in a number that from a piece of data and really capture all the considerations.
So that was great feedback on quality, because we didn't really put that in there. Are there other site conditions or information that you want to see us take a look at? Or look at differently based on all the different things that we came up with?
I think equity needs to have more points, to be honest with you. A bigger range of values.
Under which particular category?
So there's three, ADA access is one category, the median income is another category,
Used
and
by
the
the community.
current use by the community. That it really is kind of a need and equity.
So that,
Simply because we have the one lake that is absolutely no public access to it, has been a thorn in the paw of this community for a long time. I lived here from 78 till 98, where I saw the lake
Oh, yeah.
myself. I mean, it's that protected from the public, and the community that lives around it is very protective of it.
So there's two categories there. The existing public lake access is weighted by 3. So what do you think would capture more of an accurate weight for that? So,
I think it needs to be 4. We have to have public access to our lakes.
okay,
It's gotta be able to go to 4. That's just my 2 cents worth, but
what does the
you know,
board think about that?
this is one of the things we talked about with Silicon Lake and the new park. Is that is key access for our community to that
Mhm.
lake.
So we're open to changing all these different things. We just want to get bored. We don't want to just we want to get everybody's feedback on that and say, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think, we just give it we gave it a 3 and a 0, and the only 2 sites that got any points was there. So that was a +3, but you think it needs to be a +4?
so when I say +4, it's still not falling into the top 3.
Okay.
Do you want me to try to expand that? I can't really.
Well, we failed at Gravelly Lake this time. That there was a property that got bought up by the property owners.
That's what we heard.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
the
did.
city
It
had
was
put in a
bid.
thing, and then they
They
so,
gathered, it was like the buffalo around the camp.
yeah.
They just bought it out. So, either we figure out how to play with them, or there's only one other property that I know of, and that's the Pink House, as I call it, Mrs. Strong's Pink House. That's at
Just
Lake,
mute that.
Stilican Boulevard and Gravelly Lake.
Yeah.
And it was sold, it's been sold several times. I think it's around 2.5 million. I don't think the city's gonna buy it,
Right.
but that at least is a property that if it was developed, it's big enough. I think it's a double lot. So it would have the ability to have more to it. I'm not sure what the lake access is. There's a boat that's parked on one part of the property. And but most of Gravelly Lake is pretty steep going
Very steep,
down.
yeah.
So it's always going to be accessibility, but we've already shown our.
So I have a
colors.
question too. What about, like I really like what you said, let's play with them. Because they're never gonna cooperate unless we play with them.
Well,
What about
here's the
Lake Wolf?
issue with you don't have to play with them when it's your property, and
I
those
know.
2 lake seas, but it's, it's only 24 feet wide, so
Only 24 feet.
paying a lot of money and a lot of
So,
drama for a view.
yeah.
Or best you can get down to go fishing. So does the group want to change that to 4? And it doesn't necessarily put it to the top now, but it in order
I
of,
think it gives it a priority.
A
ranking.
priority
It's
in the-
appropriate. I'm not saying it's a pilot project priority,
Mhm.
but I think it needs to be right up there for us as a
does the
community.
group What does the group think about that? If everybody's in, we can change anything. This is
Well, I just
your
want to give you guys
recommendation.
information because I'm playing around with it now. So if we change it to a 4, it's still,
Can you, Anessa, can you mute, please?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Can you mute your phone? Because you're getting a lot of feedback. Thank you. And then you just raise your hand when you want to talk to us and we'll give you lots of ideas. Did you have something to share? Okay. Okay.
Okay,
so if it's weighted from a 3 to a 4, there still looks like the 4th and 5th priority. And if we change it to a 5, it is then Linwood Lane is tied for
Second.
with Wadsworth.
3rd. It's tied for 3rd between Wadsworth, which there are some additional considerations we'll touch on Wadsworth, really, that there's not a lot of significant change in use with the proposed developments.
Realistically, we're looking at the option to get access to Gravelly Lake spending millions.
Yeah.
Even though this is a very expensive, one of the highest ones to get street access done, it may be the right way to go unless we're gonna spend as a city 3, 4, 5 million on a property that's never gonna come to sale.
But what if there was public access through Lake Hold?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, so the, which is a conversation to have. The city did have that when we did the first plan in 2009. That was a recommendation of the park board. And we did go to Lakewold Gardens and they had no interest in partnering or allowing public access because at that time, that was 2009. That was several executive directors and boards ago.
Can we hold that thought because we just got a new ED?
Yeah.
Sure, but it's not up to the ED, it'd be up to their board, but
I
yeah.
realize,
but
but they
you're
work
right.
together.
Yeah, and so it could definitely be another strategy for sure, but it would not be a street end development. It would be another part of like through our legacy plan, which is great.
Yeah.
Because it is a big property that, and they do have some financial issues there that they're always looking for resources. And so maybe it could be some kind of a partnership to provide public access.
Plus, there's plenty of parking.
Mhm.
We've got 2 parking lots.
Yeah, the city put a parking lot in right in front of their place,
Yeah.
so. So that is definitely a
Yeah.
strategy. So it
That
wouldn't
might
be a
be
street end
Let's
as
know.
part of this, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a strategy for our long-term, because we're gonna be starting next year on the next update to the legacy plan, because it's every 6 years, and so we'll start that next year to be ready by May of 2026. So I'm gonna put that on my,
Because
I have a list of all the big ideas to make sure we don't forget for the next legacy
Right.
plan.
I've already broached that one. So
I think that's great.
Did you all have feedback between the one, a 5 versus a 4 of bumping it farther up?
I mean, I think you do say that does make the point that this is a priority, but it doesn't actually move it into something we can do. Yeah.
But it puts it
Well,
at the
it's
top of the
still-
list,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's a higher
And if our goal
consideration.
is to pick a pilot project, it's probably not the right one, but it's gotta be right on the tail of the pilot project. Because if it works well at Westlake, then we've got, some ground to stand and we go to the city and say, we really want you to do this now on Gravelly Lake so the city can get into it.
And show that it can work for the community if Westlake is picked. but-
So
So 4?
Alan, to address the other criteria that you were asking about, which was the current community use. Lake City Boulevard was the only site that was scored a 3, so if I bump that up to a 4, that would push Lake City Boulevard to first place at 17 points, and then the moderate use from a 1 to a 2. mm,
And people do walk. to
That
Lake
would
City to
be a
fish.
tie between Westlake and Lake City Boulevard then for first place at 17 points. And second scoring would be still Wadsworth.
I feel like we could get success there, at Lake City Boulevard.
I would just note that one is a more active use, one's a very passive use. So when you're talking about impact to neighbors, you're talking about costs. You're looking at really significant development issues there. So, and encroachment. So, I don't disagree with you. We send everybody to Lake City Boulevard. And we're in there cleaning things up. So, because there isn't really good fishing anywhere else, but.
It's not really gonna create new use.
not gonna
Yeah,
create new-
exactly. It will have a, more accessible experience. The use will be fairly similar to.
It's not a conflict of interest of fishing versus people that are playing in the water, so the fishermen always like to have calm waters.
Right.
So it,
Well, or it kind of early in the morning, later at night. The biggest problem you have is you can't fish at American Lake because you're by a boat launch, and that's a huge conflict with the boat launch in the swimming areas. So
Are you mentioning though, new use by the beach, by the water access versus the
American Lake Park.
people are doing that now.
Yeah.
People are down there with rubber rafts and things to get in. So, yeah, that's conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of how you design it too, is if you put the fishing over here, people are getting out.
Do they have water skiing, regulations on American Lake?
Just,
I mean.
just the
skiing.
direction you go and the,
Fine,
Okay.
that's what I'm wanting.
No. anytime.
Anytime.
Dawn to dusk.
Yeah.
I mean, after, you're not supposed to ski after dark.
we can
Okay.
tell you it's after dark that they like to ski.
I know.
So.
Oh,
And we do have a
we have
marine
we have
presence.
one, two,
Oh.
so what number two would be?
The police are out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So with
And
those
we can-
3 adjustments that we just made with the water quality and the use and equity. It brings Lake City Boulevard and Westlake both to site, the top scoring sites at 17. Seconds, or the third, excuse me, would be Wadsworth.
And then Westlake is more passive, is that what you said?
Westlake is, pretty passive. It's just a winding path down to the shore. It's pretty wide open. We can go over those 2 things. So let's just go back. So you did existing lake access. Did you do 4 or 5?
5.
That goes to a 5 to kind of emphasize gravelly.
And then the current community use, I changed 1 to 2 for moderate use
1 to 2.
and 3 to 4 for heavy use.
And
So
for
one
heavy,
additional.
current heavy use. Okay,
We could
and what
also look at
changed?
new use. We didn't change.
so you changed
I
lake.
hid some, hold on. Maybe BESC. I'm gonna hide some, because we also have proposed new use as well of like, is there a significant difference between the current use and what we're proposing? Unhide. So that was weighted by 1. It was significant, new value was 3, moderate is 1, none is 0, so we could also change that. Everything scored a 3 except for, I think, Wadsworth and Holly Hedge Lane, I think, obviously. So that's really gonna evenly, if we change that, it's really gonna evenly weight everything. Be evenly, it'll just be a higher score without a change in the ranking.
So going down the score then, what do you got?
Now, site number 1 and 2, I didn't change that though, so we're still at Westlake is number 1. And Lake City Boulevard, number 1, both at 17 points.
Okay,
And number 3 is Wadsworth at 16 points. Number 4 would be Linwood Lane at 15 points.
15?
Mm-hmm,
Well, that was a big bump.
mm-hmm.
Let me look at what are other criteria besides expanded flats, what were the other ones that you listed up there?
For use or,
What do we, just in our decision? Biggest bang for the buck.
That's a good return on your investment. You're gonna be able to get it done quickly, efficiently. You're not dealing with encroachment
That was-
or active shoreline issues.
right, so that's to consider, so Wadsworth keeps falling in the top scoring, the top 3 to 4 sites. But really, there's not a biggest bang for our buck on the time and money spent to develop for the minor developments really to the existing use, which is some paving, some, graphic painting and signage so that folks maybe that didn't know that was a public access site now do. But it's really not changing the current use of the site.
Question. The apparent encroachment, we're all aware of what was going on in Lake Stillicum at home. how many of these, if I'm reading this correctly, how many of these are actually with the home?
So the scoring for, let me find it, apparent encroachment, we call it a structure. I don't think we designated between a garage or a residence.
That's what I'm after.
We did not. We just, if it's a structure, it gets -2 points. I don't think anybody's primary, well,
There
that's
was
not true.
one.
There's one. I think it's
There's
Mount
one.
Tahoma.
And then there's a couple of, one whole carport, which goes up to the house, and two, one's like a beach house or that one that's on the corner of, there was a corner of one that was, kind of like a boathouse, but not a primary resident. And then
Mhm.
another one was a
What's that?
portion of,
Yeah, so we've got, Lake Avenue, and 100th Street, because the Lake Avenue had, I think a house was within the setback, so it's
oh,
really
so
their
is
whole
Melody
fence.
Lane.
And Melody
had a
Lane
big
had
old
their
Lake
house, the
Louise.
corner of their house.
It's like a garage there that's coming up right next to that,
Yep.
but it's built out.
It's all built out, and that's because of, yeah, it's
Cause that was shocking to see that.
a
'cause
big.
I
It
found
is
down there a lot.
shocking to see that when we saw that.
Yeah, some of these are big
Mm.
surprises, you know. And like I said, the city, or I haven't said, well, I might have said before, the city doesn't go and look for encroachments. We're not driving down the road going, that corner on there. But when we do a development project, and once you determine that, they do it with street projects. We've done it with some park projects. Once you've determined you are, that there's a problem, you have to deal with it. You have to make it whole. In fact, some funding agencies now are saying you've got to make it whole or you don't get your grant funds. You can't, you know, to do around it. That's happening with street projects now.
To clarify their question though about which, so of the 4 sites that had structural encroachment, the only one that would make a difference is if we weighted that differently would be like City Boulevard, because that's falling in the top 3 sites. So it would push that farther down if you weighted it from a -2 to -3 or 4,
I
for
think that
instance.
matrix weight is gonna order them very reasonably.
Makes sense. It tries to provide equity to all the lakes and, you know, ultimately. And that's what the goal is.
Yeah, so this is really just, what's the first project to set the tone for the development of all of the projects, because they all have potential.
But it will help us too, as we do a 6-year CIP, just to plug some things in. If the council wants to do one a year, you know, starting in basically 2025, but it won't start till 2025, but you have to put your resources in. It can be something that we map out for future CIP. The council consider.
Development of a water site would typically have a minimum of 3 years. I mean, I don't think it would be unrealistic for that to take 4 years, because the permitting alone takes about 1.5 years. So if there's, you know, adding on encroachment resolution to that, it's a really significant unknown.
If Lake Wold did come on board and there was no public access to Rabbit Lake, would that move Glenwood down?
No, it's just, it would just be on the list. I mean, because again, that wouldn't be a street end issue, it'd be a public access issue. I mean, maybe it would change a number, but
If there was existing public.
yeah.
access,
Yeah.
it would
Then-
change.
Yeah, it would change that one
Value,
criteria.
Put it differently in the grid.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not
Right.
eliminate it.
No, it wouldn't eliminate.
Okay, so this isn't, we will have more time to continue the conversation, but I want to get through the presentation as
Yeah,
well.
please.
So this is
Great.
just, before we tweaked all the numbers,
Done
this
yet?
is the top 3 sites, Westlake at number 1, Lake City Boulevard at number 2, and Wadsworth at number 3. This is just, you know, just the scoring instead of all the criteria. So here's where those sites are within the community. Number 1 is Westlake Avenue on the east shore of Lake Steilacoom. I think it's number 8. I can't read the number, is Lake City Boulevard on the north shore, and then Wadsworth on the south shore. Some additional considerations which are not captured also in the matrix are, what's the proximity to an existing developed lake access site in the city? So looking at the map, our public park system is in green. You can see on American Lake that Wadsworth is within a very close proximity. It's probably about a half a mile to Harry Todd Park, which has just had accessible improvement to the lake shore, beach access, and a fishing pier. Not shown on the map is also Camp Murray, which has public access. So I just talked about that. Some additional supplemental considerations though, because Wadsworth keeps coming up within the top few scoring sites. We spoke with two Silcox Island residents that have a familiar are familiar with the use of that site. So there are, I think they said about 28 or 30 total residences, but only 8 of those are year round. So it has very limited use because folks typically just launch their boat for the year and then take them out at the end of the year. But the launch is also used for mail construction access and dock repair. The majority of the public use is by neighbors with small boats for fishing.
Telecom neighbors.
Telecom neighbors. There is a significant lack, there's a significant lack of parking even in the immediate adjacent neighborhood because those streets are very narrow. So the lack of parking and the lack of a dock float to support the launch impacts the use of the site. And as that map just showed, the proximity of Harry Todd Park for fishing and Camp Murray for launching are very close to that particular site. Some supplemental considerations that we've all been speaking about are that Gravelly Lake has no public access. There is minimal development potential on those sites because of the steep slope. The impacts to the neighborhood because of the lack of parking and the narrow streets and on-street parking is limited, and then the cost versus the experience. So those sites were higher, obviously, due to the steepness and the development need to get down to the lake shore. So considering taking those allocated funds, as we just spoke about, to support an acquisition is something that could be considered.
And then also add to consider property purchase or lake wall partnership. That was something that came up. So we'll add that.
And then the budget considerations was just the additional, a little bit of escalation for the when the construction would actually occur. So in summary, just really, really high level for these top 3 scoring sites. Westlake Avenue scored the highest, so it had the highest potential for success.
That's still.
What?
Is that still with the changes that you just made?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Let me
okay.
see. Yeah, but it's tied now. If we make those changes, Lake City Boulevard and Westlake would be tied. That Westlake was the site that had accessible parking and lake access, and it would provide West Lake Silicon access, which currently doesn't exist. Lake City Boulevard also has high potential. It would alleviate stress on American Lake Park for summer use. That's not captured in the metric, but we know that would be true. But the encroachment at that site is really significant. And then Wadsworth is located in a very high need area. Since equity is a big priority, that we do consider that, but there would be limited improvements to the current use with the proposed development. So here's just what, without making the changes, the breakdown of that. So
what we'd be looking for tonight, if you think that you're ready, would be a recommendation. We can have more discussion. I just want to let you know kind of where we're going with this because it is 7. Or we can have a special meeting to continue the conversation. But the idea is we'd be looking for a recommendation for a pilot project. The recommendation can be whatever you want it to be. You could add additional criteria. I heard something about maybe Gravelly Lake isn't the right pilot project, but it should be there soon thereafter. That was some of the changes you suggested to bring it up on the list.
Yeah.
So just continue to chat amongst yourselves, but chair, vice chair, person in charge. Eventually, we'd like to get to a recommendation tonight because we are going to council in September. We don't normally meet in August, but we can easily have an extra meeting. That's not a big deal if you think we're not ready.
I wanted to just go pull up to though the Westlake Avenue site, since that scored the highest, so that people could refresh the visual of the design of that site.
What's the little red boat? Does that mean that people?
It's
can
just
carry their-
somebody's
A paddleboard.
So they could carry any suggestions.
Oh, yeah, it's just a pretty straight shot.
Inflatable things are so easy to get to places, and I think that's where a lot of this stuff is going.
Right.
I think for, the biggest bang for the buck, and that was one of the criteria, this is it. I mean, even though it's got some negativities with maybe the water quality or maybe the use, but it's a good first program, first project.
There's no encroachments, right?
No encroachment.
None that were evident
I think that's
from
kind of
the
like,
trip.
Yeah, yeah.
we could
That's
go
a
in there and
blessing,
nobody's
yeah.
gonna shoot us.
Comments?
I totally agree. I think when we recommend this to the city council, we should say, this is your pilot project, but we want you to put, Linwood Lane up high on the grid, because that's gotta be a priority for our city. And they're gonna get this grid now after they worked it, seen it do.
Yeah.
We worked it over a little bit.
We'll walk through what the current grid is and
Yeah.
and the points and why they got put in the way that they are. Cause a 5 and a 0, that's a pretty significant identifier that this is an important project, right? You put
Yeah.
it there to raise it up. So, and that can be part of your recommendation as well as a board.
I also would like to say, if Lakeville partners with us, then we would maybe reconsider the priority of.
Yeah, it all depends on the baggage with Lakewald.
Yeah.
I mean, it could go anywhere.
Right.
There's gonna be a lottery and we're gonna get, one person gets to go in there once a year or something,
Yeah.
What is it? Who
Yeah.
knows?
And it is private. So the other
Yeah.
thing is that you're never gonna have full public access. You're gonna be based at the committed to the whatever agreement. And so, but,
I mean, it's a great site.
It's a thought
Yeah, it's a thought and it's something to work on.
to think about.
yeah, new
It's not a
people there. It's
steep
been
area.
several years.
Yeah.
There's been lots of improvements.
Plus,
there.
we're improving the Alexander Walkway. So there is quote unquote beach access,
And there's
So you
beach
could-
there, unlike
Yeah.
Linwood, which
Yeah.
is just, a drop off.
right? And it's pretty gradual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's opportunity. As I told Lori,
Not
there's
ADA.
opportunities lurking here.
Lakewald is not 80.
Uh,
Well, up above is, but not.
Getting down.
Down to the water. is
No.
not.
we've talked about it. We've talked about that.
So, I mean, we've looked at this on a parks board. It's just the fourth time we've gone through every one of these street ends. I think it's time to do something. So I would move that we recommend Westlake.
Yeah.
That's a
I
first-
totally agree.
that's a first
City
project.
Council.
Any other comments? Do we have a second?
My
Motion.
comment would be with Wadsworth, I think we need to notify the Stillicum Lake
Wadsworth,
District. Not Wadsworth, sorry.
Westlake,
Westlake, we need to.
have a conversation with the,
Conversation.
Well,
Find
if
them, we'll
council,
ferret them out,
what do you mean, have a conversation
that-
with them?
the lake
water quality.
owners, yeah, the water quality, they're gonna have to tell people what's going on and.
But we've got
Well-
that on the list as water quality, so.
Yeah, water quality is on the list, and if council makes the decision and it moves something forward, that's when we would, I mean, well, I wouldn't have a conversation until council makes a decision
Right.
on something, so, just like Gravy Lake, I mean, until they make a decision, so I don't get people all picked out.
Hyped up.
I don't think people are gonna have a problem with Westlake, people are using it now, they've
Yeah.
had cleanup parties there.
It's
There's a
natural-
path, you can see a natural path, people are going down there regularly, just makes it safe, and
Yeah.
then everybody can go down there.
Do I have a second on Ellen's proposal or?
Did you second it?
I will though.
Okay.
All in favor of that proposal?
Westlake. It's
Yeah.
a-
I think it's the first project. In
Aye.
favor?
All in favor? Aye.
All right,
Okay. There you go.
I will visit that tomorrow.
Oh, good.
And we can, Nikki, you could write that up so that Jason gets copied on that too. He may have a comment or two.
Jason Gerwin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll
Yeah.
put it all in the minutes, and we'll put a staff report together for council. That'll be in
That would be
September.
great, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be super. Good
Okay.
discussion,
Mhm.
real good discussion.
Nice report.
Thank you.
Very,
There's a lot of
very
information there. It's
deep.
exhausting project to gotta
very
go through, but there's a lot of
Very-
exciting opportunity.
Very
Well, what would be
impressive.
the process? Okay, so we're gonna develop Westlake. We would reach out to the neighbors and say, hey, we're gonna have a little meeting on.
Yeah, well,
Their
once,
improvement,
yeah,
just
once
like what we
council, yeah, just like anything else, we'll probably have a meeting out there. We could have it on site, depending on the time of the year.
Right,
Put up a table and a tent and say, hey, here's this little schematic. of what we're thinking about, thoughts, concerns, issues,
Yeah.
impacts.
Yeah.
And then move forward. That, besides the permitting, I know. It's a pretty,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to do. It's really, limbing up and clearing out and putting in an
Yeah.
accessible pathway.
Yeah, mostly
Um,
landscape type.
Yeah, it's just the shoreline right
Yeah.
now. It's just harder and harder to do anything on the shoreline, so.
What do you think would be the objections?
Well, there's fear whenever you do anything anywhere. People are worried, about, I'll say
Homeless
sex, drugs and
camps.
rock and roll.
Yeah.
All of the above at 9:30 or 10 or 11 or 2. And like anywhere,
Somebody's gonna come down there and light fireworks off.
Oh,
which they probably already are.
Hmm.
But I would say, it's just, anytime there's change, anytime there's change,
Sure.
it's always creates fear. So you always try and work with folks so that they're aware, they have an engagement, they have opportunities to provide feedback. And then sometimes you have to crush fingers and
Mhm.
come back, and then they it's like potholes in a road. It's like afterwards they forget how horrible it was and it's the greatest thing ever. And they fought you the whole time.
Yeah.
Anything we've done at Fort Stolican has been a major
Yeah.
challenge. And then you get done and they're like, it's the greatest thing you've ever done. So
Mhm.
it's hard sometimes, but.
Like
Worth
raising
it.
kids.
So then, should we
Director's
just,
report?
yeah, so I just wanted to go in real quickly. Summerfest, many of you were there. It was a super great event. We've had really good feedback. We've made lots of changes and I just think it gets better and better. So anyway, if you didn't go, I'm sorry you missed it. It was really hot, but really it turned out to be a great event and we'll have more statistics later. But we had about 40,000 people last year and it seemed like there were just as many or more, but it was really flowed really well. So it's good. Farmers market is on Tuesdays, 2 to 7, and our concerts are following. So the next one's gonna be chapter 5 next Tuesday. They're great, really fun, rhythm and blues and funk and soul, and they're a great group. And look at the calendar. So that starts at 6:30. So you can come down, get some food, go to the concert, and that's great.
Were the vendors, because of the 2 days when you didn't have it, was that difficult for them? to
No.
Go around?
No.
They're used to it.
We're getting 5,000 to 7,000 people every week. Everybody's selling out and everybody's making money. So. Yeah, and those, many of those vendors, a lot of them came to the market, or came to Summerfest, and
did
so, and record sales for food vendors, record sales for vendors, people were pretty happy, so, so they made up for it. And then just so you know, on August 27th, it's gonna be Mr. Pink is the band, but it's gonna be the police department's 20th anniversary, so they're gonna have kind of a celebration at Farmers Market into the summer concert, so they'll have displays and activities and things. So it'll be kind of a celebration of our police department on August 27th.
Their anniversary of what?
20th anniversary of becoming a
20th.
police department. Yeah, we started off as contracting with the sheriff and then
Yeah.
we created our own police department. So they'll be celebrating that on August 27th. And then Devi wanted to share a little bit about the 2 meetings we have coming up for Primley Park and Oak Brook. We had planning meetings as a board. So do you want to just share that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is David de la Cruz, new project manager here. Excited to be here. So as part of some efforts I've been working through for Primley Park, I have put together some boards just to kind of summarize previous conversations with community members so that they understand that we are listening, and talk through the expected timeline and budget that we have set aside for the improvements at Primley Park specifically. I won't go into the detail. You'll take a peek at the boards next week, but basically we're looking at ADA pathway improvements, an ADA parking stall, and a completely new and refreshed playground equipment structure. So really focusing on either 2 to 5 or 5 to 12, and having that conversation next week on the 31st.
It'd be
with
one or
folks.
the other.
One or the other. It can't be both. So just because of the constraints of the project and also constraints of the
Budget and location.
exactly.
How will you develop chipmunks if it's 5 to 12?
As much as possible, finding a way to bring in woodland creatures and that chipmunk element. Yeah, we're I have some playground
Okay.
structures set aside that kind of speak to the chipmunks, not specifically
Okay.
chipmunks, but just speak to that.
We know that they're very important. We heard that.
Very important. Yeah, so I'll also have a site plan so folks can comment on it, some potential proposed ADA routes that we are thinking through, and yeah, we'll just kind of have that conversation.
Out on site.
On
So
site
that's-
is the goal.
And that's next Wednesday at
5:30.
PM, 5:30 PM.
We'll start the conversation at 5:30 and then start the official presentation by 7 and walk around the site as usual. Look forward to that. And then an additional conversation with other folks at Oak Brook Park. There's a National Night Out event coming up on Tuesday, August 6th. And so I'll plan to be there with a poster board similar to this and a table, just kind of speaking with residents about what they'd like to see and some of the potential options for improvements at Oak Brook, which may include perimeter trail, sports court, recreational court, like pickleball or basketball or both, and then a shelter with site furnishings. So those are some of the options that we're thinking through initially, and yeah, just look forward to having that conversation.
That's in my neighborhood. What time is it?
That will start at
5 to 7.
5.
Mhm.
5 to 7.
And that's National Night Out. So they do a big activity at the park. So we thought it'd be a great way to capture those
Great.
community members. So. And they usually have displays and the council comes by and the fire department. So.
Thank you. Look forward to that.
And then I was just gonna share, yeah, so you're all welcome to come. It's not an official park board meeting, but we'd love to have you there if you want, just to hear from the folks and see what's going on. And Nikki will send out a little reminder to you. And then, just from Urban Forestry, I think Vito, you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, they are doing a big inventory right now. The last one we did was 2015, 17, something like that. So they're updating the citywide inventory. And they still haven't really figured out how they're gonna do an urban forestry program because there's so many components to it, limited funding. So I think that'll be probably more part of the budget. They've talked about, kind of dividing the love between, community development, which is enforcement, permitting. Public Works is putting in new and you build streets and roads, and then we would be like replacement and maybe management. So, but they haven't really said who the keeper of the universe is. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens with that. And
Flip the coin.
yeah,
So
So
who's
we're-
doing maintenance?
that would be part of one of the pieces of the urban forestry program.
Okay,
Whether we did it or contracted it out, but it would be something that would be actually planned, and you'd have a maintenance program,
right.
replacement program, or plant now because, this one's gonna go in 10 years and you need to have something started. So,
Okay.
it's been very reactionary in our community, and so really it'd be more hopefully strategic and planned.
Okay, sounds good.
That's what's come up. And then we don't usually meet in August, but we usually have a summer party. So, does anybody have any big ideas on that or thoughts or time of year? First couple weeks of August, maybe? Only 'cause
I'm always glad to have it. I have a son getting wedding married August 10th, so it'd have to be kind of late in August for me. If that, you want to do it at home place.
Are you doing the wedding out there?
No.
Oh, where are you guys getting married?
Isaiah, my youngest son,
And where are you getting married? Or where is he getting married?
some venue up by Auburn and a barn.
Oh, Kelly, Kelly,
Yeah.
Kelly Barn. So you're not gonna be out of town like
No,
weeks at a time?
But I've got the urban forestry crew both those last 2 weeks, so you can come over and see what we've done next door at the wildlife area, give you all the
So
tour.
Last 2
amazing.
weeks.
Yeah,
That'd
last
be
two,
good.
yeah.
Those would be good. Well, third week I could come.
Let's see,
It's like
our
somewhere we
Tuesday
should,
would be the 20th or the 27th.
Damn it.
27th is that.
27th, we've got something that night.
That's the farmer's market.
Yeah.
20th works great.
The 20th? Any objections?
Your house, yep.
I may or may not be, but that's okay. I can float around. That would be. And you're willing to host. That's so great. We usually do it as potluck for any new folks. Everybody's welcome to come. You're welcome to bring your kids, right, Alan? I'm
Yes.
just saying this down
We'll
for
have a
everybody
pool
else.
up, you got a tree house and a trampoline.
Oh my God, that's way more fun than my house.
Geese away.
So Tuesday, the 20th.
What time?
Let's see, what's the concert that night? That's the ABBA concert. Do you want to do it on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday or a Monday?
Your council meeting.
Yeah, but I don't have to go.
don't know if I'll be here Monday.
Monday, the 19th.
Yeah, I know I'll be here the 20th.
20th is fine.
We can do,
Still
what's that?
concerts.
What's going on Tuesday?
Tuesday's just, there's a concert in the park but that's okay. We
It
can
was
still go.
ABBA.
Can you go, Nikki? What time does?
I'll be at the market.
Till after 7, so.
You want to try and do it Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday's good.
Like Wednesday?
No band conflicts.
21st.
The time again?
Mayor's having a coffee house, but that's.
You meet at
It's
5:30.
not
That's
He's
our-
always having something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
5:30, 5:30.
5:30.
What's your address, Alan?
I usually send out an.
Yeah.
Okay.
with
Just set something up.
directions and-
And then what do you want us to bring
yeah,
to?
And then we usually kind of do a list of
Yeah,
Okay,
who's bringing what.
okay.
sounds good.
And our spouses, attending as well? No, yes,
What did you say? I'm sorry?
spouse,
Oh, yeah, spouses,
No, no,
kids,
Leave them at home.
yeah.
BYOB, you can bring whatever you want
Oh.
to drink, because it's not official business, so.
Okay. That's your place now. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that?
Everything's brown because I don't water, so
Okay,
I go natural.
Me too.
A lot of
Awesome.
people have been going round.
I'm spending money, on other stuff, heating my pool.
Any other comments by the boardman? One, two, three. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn the meeting
All right.
at 7:20.
One meeting.
There's a lot
We
to
had a lot to
cover.
cover.
Yeah.
It's important too, it's an important topic, so.
Mary gave it to me.
It has a lot of impact. on
Didn't I
our-
give you one of those?
There's an essay.
Yeah.
no,
Are you sure?
positive.
Is she in her car
Hi, Vanessa, she's out, she was going to the airport. Do you want to borrow, take one? It's online, I think maybe, but I can give you one to use or have.